hanging the laundry on the roof, when they were targeted in airstrikes or tank shelling. How did the children die? How those 350 Palestinian children died? Amnesty says the children were studying or playing in their bedrooms or on the roof or outside their homes when they were struck by missiles or tank shells. Now, nearly everybody in this room heard the Israeli allegation that Hamas was using Palestinians as human shields. Now, by a show of hands, how many of you are aware that every major human rights organization and fact-finding mission reached the conclusion that there was no evidence that Hamas was engaged in human shielding? How many know that? Raise your hand. Well, look around the room. You could say overall maybe about 10. And that tells you something about how the reality of what goes on there is distilled in our media. Is it true that there was no human shielding in Gaza? No, there was a lot. There's extensive evidence of human shielding in Gaza. Actually, quite ghastly evidence. Evidence that Israel was using Palestinians as human shields. All of the investigative bodies which surveyed the scene after the Israeli invasion, they all concluded that Israel committed multiple war crimes and possibly or definitely crimes against humanity. They also concluded that Hamas committed comparable crimes, but on an incomparably smaller scale. After all, how many crimes can ants commit against a child, incinerating them with a magnifying glass? After the invasion was over, there were many human rights organizations, individuals, fact-finding missions, which looked into what happened. The best known came to be called, and is still called, the Goldstone Mission. In April 2009, the President of the Human Rights Council appointed Richard Goldstone to head a mission to investigate what happened in Gaza. Goldstone, a South African jurist, is an eminent international prosecutor. He was the prosecutor of the International Criminal Tribunals for the former Yugoslavia and Rwanda. And after about 3 months, he produced a very substantial report. It runs to about 500 pages, his report on what happened in Gaza. And his main conclusions for our purposes were, first of all, what happened in Gaza. The Goldstone Mission concluded, and now I quote them, Israel launched a deliberately disproportionate attack designed to punish, humiliate, and terrorize a civilian population. Israel launched a deliberately disproportionate attack designed to punish, humiliate, and terrorize a civilian population. Some people want to say, yes, there was some errors of judgment in Gaza. But it was because in every army there are some bad apples. There were some bad apples among the Israeli army. But the Goldstone Mission says, no, that's not really possible. They say the systematic and deliberate nature of the activities leave the mission in no doubt that responsibility lies in the first place with those who designed, planned, ordered, and oversaw the operations. What happened in Gaza was not the result of a few bad apples. It was the deliberate decisions of Israel's political and military leaders. Some people found that conclusion of Goldstone and the Goldstone Mission extreme. That Israel launched an attack designed to punish, humiliate, and terrorize Israeli leaders before, during, and after the attack were so candid about what they intended and what they did do that it was impossible for Goldstone to conclude anything else. Before the attack, the head of Israel's northern command, he said, "We will yield disproportionate power against every village from which shots are fired at Israel. We will cause immense damage and destruction." The former head of Israel's National Security Council, he said before the attack, "In the next war will lead to intense suffering among the enemy population, the destruction of homes and infrastructure, the suffering of hundreds of thousands of people." During the attack, Israel's Foreign Minister, Tzipi Livni, she said, quote, "Hamas now understands that when you fire on Israel's citizens, it responds by going wild. And this is a good thing." The day after the invasion was over, Foreign Minister Livni, she went on Israel's Channel 10 News and she said, "Israel demonstrated real hooliganism during the course of the recent operation," which is what I demanded. Real hooliganism, which is what I demanded. And then a strange thing happened. Ms. Livni, she was going to the United Kingdom, and when she got to the United Kingdom, she was issued with papers for her arrest for committing war crimes. And Ms. Livni was shocked. She was completely bewildered. She couldn't understand what was happening. She apparently thought that real hooliganism was protected by the Geneva Conventions. A former Israeli defense official, he said after the attack, "With an armada of fighter planes attacking Gaza, Israel decided to play the role of a mad dog for the sake of future deterrence." A former senior Israeli security official said that Israel had regained its deterrence capacity because it has shown Hamas, Iran, and the region that it could be as lunatic as any of them. Lunatic, mad dog, real hooliganism, wild, immense suffering. What else was the Goldstone report supposed to conclude in the face of what the Israeli officials were saying before, during, and after the attack? When the Goldstone report came out, it was the subject of a huge outrage across the Israeli political spectrum, not just the so-called right wing, but the so-called doves. So there was Sir Shimon Peres, he was knighted by Oxford, Sir Peres, Shimon Peres, and Mr. Peres, the dove. He called the Goldstone report a mockery of history. And he said that Goldstone is a small man, devoid of any sense of justice. And then he proceeded to set the record straight on the real history of the Israeli conflict with the Palestinians. So is there anyone here from the West Bank? Raise your hand. Okay, so Mr. Peres explained that it was Israeli military operations are what brought economic prosperity in the West Bank.